Today it is my real pleasure to speak with Tammy Cox. Tammy, you are a dedicated transformational coach specializing in helping professional women save their marriages from divorce through inner child healing. You have developed a unique approach to guide women on a transformative path to rekindle love and intimacy in their marriage, and you are passionate about helping them heal from childhood trauma and foster deep personal growth. Tammy, I'm delighted to have you on the show today. It's such a pleasure.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, and your presence, I just have to say, is like so calming and rich. I love being in your presence. So thank you for having me.
It is my real pleasure. Someone was telling me earlier today that I have a soothing voice, so I don't know
You do.
how much of a true that is, but it's good to hear.
Oh,
So
it's very
thank you.
true.
uh, Tammy, I'm looking forward to this conversation and exploring, among other things, the healing the inner child, and that's something that, as I was telling you before we started recording, am very much intrigued with this topic and want to hear your perspective and your wisdom on it. And also about rekindling intimacy in the marriage and all these things that you help your clients with. Before we go there, uh, tell us a bit more about your personal journey. Specifically, I would like to ask how or what shaped your approach to marriage counseling that you do now.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to give you the whole backstory because it paints the picture. I grew up in a household with a lot of trauma, we'll say. You know, my parents did the best they could with what they had, but there was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of control. And like my parents were very religious. So there was a lot of control. Like we weren't allowed to speak for ourselves. We weren't allowed to feel differently than our parents. It was just, we were also very, very sheltered, which didn't help. But when I was 11, I found out my dad had AIDS and he died about a month later. And this turned my entire world upside down because, first of all, my dad was he was abusive, so there was a part of me that felt relieved when he died, and then I felt guilty that I felt relieved that he died. Um, I loved him dearly, and at the same time, there was a lot of trauma wounds I had to work through very young, and so I spent my teenage years angry, bitter, confused. And I really went on these like high highs, these low lows. Um, and when I turned about 19, I hit a low point where I was like, I'm either going to take my life or I'm going to heal myself because I was just a mess. And that was the first time I made the decision that I was going to heal myself. But like a lot of our journeys, it wasn't quick and it wasn't fast or immediate. So I went through just, first of all, counseling, books, any type of therapy I could get my hands on. I'd tried everything and it would work for a minute. And then things would go kind of right back to where they were. So I was seeking out this solution for many, many years. And when I became a wife and when I became a mom, all of the triggers started alarming in my system. My nervous system was shot. I was just a mess. And then I was like, oh shit, I'm going to mess up this perfect little baby just the way that I was messed up, because I started to see that I was perpetuating the patterns that I was raised with. And that's where I really started digging in deep. And I said, I cannot become my father. I had control issues myself. And so this is when I started doing the trauma work, the inner child healing, and it was really the only thing that worked for me. And when I found it, it not only transformed me and my family, because my husband and we had a really bad marriage for a long time, because I was just a freaking mess, you know? And when I started to heal these inner trauma wounds, I started to become a different person. Um, and when we healed our marriage and our family started to transform, um, I I got to that place, like many of us do, where I was like, the entire world needs this sort of healing. Like, we all need to heal from our wounds, because whether or not we had like a really traumatic childhood like myself, or whether we just had whatever our first years were like, we all have healing that we need to do on that little girl or little boy within us. And so that's when I sort of made it my mission, that I was going to bring this work to the world, that we all need it. So that's the shorter version of the story.
You already gave me a lot in this very, very short thing. And, one thing that I want to ask, because when you were describing it, I thought, this sounds familiar. You were describing about doing different methods or counseling for healing, or to trying to find a solution, as you were saying, and you found that all of them were working just a little bit, and then you would go back to that. So my question is, and I'm thinking right now of someone listening to this conversation and might have found that, I've been trying to find a solution to my or to heal, or to but whatever I have tried doesn't seem to, it kind of works. It's not like it's useless, but it doesn't really change things in the way that they want to. So what do you think? What is the missing or the key factor there? Why, at least from your experience, why didn't this counseling, and I don't know, I suppose you did a lot of things. You used the word everything earlier. What do
Yeah,
you think
books.
they didn't work?
Because they didn't get down to the root cause. Talk therapy, this is modern science. Talk therapy doesn't work. It can work only like initially. Like, so say you're a person who's never spoken about things that happened to them, and they finally get it out with through talk therapy. That can be beneficial. But aside from that, just talking about your problems actually doesn't solve them. And so when you think about going to a counselor, or especially with a couple, where you go to a counselor and she's like, oh, he does this, this, and that. And he's like, well, she does this, this, and that. You're talking about like the surface level stuff, right? That doesn't tell you anything. So then you spend an hour talking about all this. Oh, well, you maybe don't do that and you don't do this. It's like, yeah, but if you don't get into the reasons why each of them are doing what they're doing, then you're really not doing anything for the root cause. And so for me, my husband wasn't even involved in my transformation, right? Because I went down to the root cause of my issues, which was the beliefs that I received or accepted at the point of these high negative emotions. See, when you're in those first 5 years of life, you don't have the upper faculties of mind. So what happens is you go through a traumatic event, you're wide open, and in that traumatic event, you choose a belief. And that belief gets wired into your subconscious mind. So your programming is hardwired by the time you're 8. So until you go back and you change the program settings, you're running the same program. And so I like to tell people this because it gives them a really good, clear view. The 2 commands, we call them commands in my line of work, the 2 commands that were hardwired onto my subconscious mind were, I'm not lovable and I'm not important. And because those were there, they showed up in every single relationship I had until I recognized them and I changed them. So when I say go down to the root cause, we got to go to those 5 years. If we're not working in those first 5 years of life, then we're not ever going to find the root. And some would argue with something like epigenetics, which is a whole big topic, that it goes even before your lifetime because we carry the beliefs of 7 generations back on both mother and father sides. So we got to go deep. We can't talk about the things that annoy us about the other person. We got to talk about our personal belief systems that are controlling our entire life experience.
That's a great way to put it. And you said earlier, and I got that as a sign, really, or a clear sign that something is happening. You used the phrase you found yourself perpetuating the patterns or what you experienced as a child, then you were perpetuating that. So I think, and my question is, apart from that, realizing, I mean, that you are perpetuating some behaviors that your parents, your father, your mother had as a child, what other signs are there from your experience that tell someone that there is an unresolved trauma going back from childhood? Are there other things for us to look for before we actually start the process of going back and addressing them?
Yeah, like your triggers. When you get triggered, for me, I got so triggered by my kids all the time. Anytime they didn't respect me, and I'm using these quotes because that was my viewpoint when my kids didn't respect me, because in my house growing up, it was like I had to do everything they said. It was such tight control. And it was very fear-based premise. It's like, you will do, they could not tolerate for any free thinking. It's like, you will do exactly what I say. And I have this very clear idea of who you're going to be, and you can't be anything else. So when I saw myself like wanting to control my kids like that, I was like, no, I want my kids to be autonomous. I want them to be free. I want them to feel free to be their own unique self. I don't want to slam them into this box and say, you will be this because this is what I was taught was right. It's like it's any sort of control based on fear that I saw coming up in my programming, that I was like, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with, if you don't do what I say, I have this whole list of things that I'll do to you. But for me, to really know that you have stuff that you need to work on, it's your triggers. Look at your behavior and say, am I in alignment with who I'm being in this relationship? And this should be a question we ask ourselves in every relationship. But when it comes to like being a parent, it's this fine line of like, okay, you get to protect your kids, right? You're the one that's supposed to keep them alive, keep them safe, keep them fed. So you're responsible for them. And then where is it that you're trying to impress and impose your beliefs and your ways of being on them in a way that's not serving them?
The triggers, the moment you use the word triggers, that was, at least for me, I completely get it, how you mean it. So I'm keeping those two, let's say, traits, the realizing that you perpetuate behaviors of the past, and also what triggers you, which triggers you, I interpret it, triggers you to behave in not the way that you would like to behave, and then you, of course, you realize that on retrospection afterwards. Tell me, how can someone begin the process of identifying first and probably addressing afterwards the the childhood wounds or the trauma that it says. What's one step for someone to take to begin the process of it?
I love that. So if you're at home and you want to try this on your own, the goal is to get to the bottom of the beliefs. So say you get triggered, right? And you're right. Trigger is something like in hindsight, you're like, oh, what just happened there?
Hmm.
You got upset by something, and you maybe were kind of confused as to why you're upset about it, right? Like, why am I triggered when my kids don't listen to me or don't obey me? And so I sit down with a piece of paper and I'm like, what am I upset about? And I write something down, right? Maybe it's like, they don't listen to me. I feel unheard. And you just start going down the list of everything you felt in that moment where you got triggered. And then you get to like the baseline. And when I got to the baseline of why I was triggered with my kids is because I believed I was a bad mom. So it hit, whenever you're triggered, think about it. It's triggering you because it's tapping a place where you're sore, because nothing has any meaning except for the meaning you give it. So your goal is to find out what belief you're holding that would trigger you to feel pain when that specific thing happens. So my husband, I would get triggered. Going into marriage, I would get triggered when he'd ignore me, when he would not want to emotionally connect. He would kind of steer clear of me. Like, the truth be told, I was unsafe for him for a lot of years. I was not healthy, so I wasn't safe for him, and I totally understand why he did it. But I attracted a man that had his trauma wounds were opposite mine. His trauma response was opposite of mine. So I picked a man that triggered me with his emotional response, which was to pull away. And so when he would pull away, then I'd get triggered and I'd turn into a monster and be like, like just imagine like a kid with a tantrum. That's how I respond when I'm triggered, where he would just like hide and disappear or freeze. And so we would just go in this circle where we would constantly trigger each other. Um, and respond in the way that it was just this cycle. And when I learned, when my goat was not so gettable, when I started to heal the wounds, the triggers weren't alarming every 2 seconds because I had healed these parts of myself. So there wasn't that soft spot to poke. I didn't have all these wounds, right? And we really get to look at why. And so now I tell my husband, now that I'm in this place, I'm like, when the little tantrum, when my 4-year-old self comes out and the tantrum starts, here's how you can respond. Right. And now I can go scoop her up in my arms the moment I see her getting upset, because I do have a very close relationship with her. And for some people, they might be like, why is she referring to herself as a different person? And it's because every age you've ever been still actually exists within you. You have all these different parts to yourself. And so I'm very connected to those parts now. So I can work with those different parts of myself. But to be that connected to you, and to be so conscious when you go into those moments of deep pain, because that's what's happening. You're in pain. And how do you get to treat yourself, that part of you, when you're in pain? Well, for me, I know exactly what to do. So for the person who's just beginning on this journey, start to investigate your belief system. Start to get a pen and paper. When you get triggered, don't judge yourself. It's key. Do not judge yourself, because you created and developed this way of being in order to keep you safe. So I want you to have so much grace and openness towards yourself when you're investigating these deep-rooted beliefs. But no, it goes back to the first 5 years. So, and sometimes it might take multiple years. I'm still finding beliefs within myself, right? After all these years of healing. So just know that the journey is probably endless as long as you're in this body, and be open to the process of just investigating with no judgment.
That's quite very important what you said about not judging. And when you were talking about how you would get triggered by your husband, and I was thinking
The
about
cycle.
yeah, the cycle. I was thinking about also my relationship with my partner, which we do have this tendency to trigger each other a lot. And the what I find interesting, and that also actually happened not very long ago. Up to some point, I thought that this was a big, let's say, disadvantage to the relationship because of the, I will use quotes now, incompatibilities. But I realize now, and I realize more and more, and with this conversation even more, that those behaviors that in our partner that trigger us can also serve as a wonderful opportunity, if you have the self-awareness, to realize that my trauma is coming up. So the trigger is actually shedding light on the trauma. It's coming up, and when it comes up, then you have some opportunity to deal with it. Whereas if it is deep buried in the subconscious, it's much more difficult to deal with it. I don't know if you agree with me on
I
that, but
totally agree. No, I totally agree. And the word opportunity, it's a beautiful word. Yes.
mm,
It's an opportunity for you to investigate why you feel the way you do in that moment.
of course, having the self-awareness to take it as an opportunity and not go down a spiral of an emotional reaction, that's another thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I believe that we attract the person we do for the healing journey we need.
Yes.
Right? Because there's the reason why I work around the topic of marriage is because there's no more intimate relationship than a marriage. And your partner is simply the closest mirror that you can find. They're the closest mirror. And, when women come to me, they always have this, it's everyone's belief until they start their journey. It's him. It's the other person. He's saying it's her.
Yes.
It's her. It's him. It is not them. No, 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 no. It is the other person. But as we start to unpack everything, they start to realize, oh, no, that this is us. We've co-created that. And it's beautiful as long as you can see it as that. Like, this is our opportunity. That's what I think the gift of marriage is that, like, you can't be unhealthy in a marriage and have a healthy marriage. You have to, or relationship, any intimate relationship, but it's going to constantly reflect the relationship you have with yourself.
Mm.
So for me, I hated myself so deeply for almost my entire life. I hated myself. How could I let another person love me when I believed that I was unlovable? I couldn't, because the second that they told me that they love me, I'd be like, liar.
Mhm.
Now I can't trust you. Like, you know what I'm saying? I had to shift that within me. And that's the way it goes with all of us. I don't care who you're in a partnership with. You are reflecting each other to each other.
Mm. I like
So,
very much this
yes.
description. You use the word mirror, and now you say reflecting each other, and it's certainly, in my experience, also it happens like that. It's only, as I was saying earlier, it's being able to recognize that when it happens, rather than getting lost in the habitual perpetuating
Yeah.
pattern and go
And
that way.
And when we take the shame out of it, the shame
Mm-hmm.
that we all freaking live with, oh,
Mm.
if there's one thing I could eliminate from every single person on this planet, it would be shame. What kind of planet would we have if no one allowed themselves to go into those dark, negative, self-judging belief systems of shame and guilt? If we could just eliminate that, man, we would be a much healthier people.
I agree. And these are, the most lowest vibrational emotions. Shame and guilt are, they really
Mm-hmm.
drain us down. I wanted to ask one more thing, Tammy, about healing the inner child. I think we covered enough interesting things with it so far, but there is one other thing based on your experience. Is there any common misconception that you see people holding regarding inner child wound and healing the inner child? And is there something that you have noticed as common misconception?
With healing the inner child?
Yes.
Okay. Hmm. I don't know that I don't know that I can answer that. I don't know that I've seen a misconception with that. If so, no one's bringing it to my attention.
Okay. That's fine. I
So,
wanted to ask that just in case there was some kind of a common factor, maybe that stops or slows people down toward
oh.
pursuing that path or that
Oh,
journey.
okay. Well, I kind of touched on it, but um they don't understand that basically every memory that you hold in the
Hmm.
subconscious mind, it all plays a part in your journey. Like I said, we're like the Russian dolls, right? Where you open one, there's another, and there's another, and we have endless versions of ourselves in
Hmm.
within here. And
Yes.
so sometimes people have this misconception that all they are is what sits in front of them in the quote unquote present moment.
Hmm.
Um, but they actually don't. There's so many pieces to them that they are so out of touch with because are literally every single age right here in the present moment. And so if there's any misconception, because a lot of times I take people to those moments, right? And they're still active. We're much like a computer where we have lots of files open right in front of us. And we have to go in, we have to close some of those files, especially the ones that aren't serving us. So I think the misconception might be that they don't realize how active those files that are open are, how much they're integrated into their personality, how much their
Hmm.
personality was created by traumatic events that they have the ability to neutralize and um, close the screen, like close the tab on, um, and that they have the ability to change anything about themselves that they choose to. Like
Hmm.
you're not stuck with anything. You're not stuck with any of your ways of being. You're not stuck with any condition. Like for instance, when I do a lot of the modalities I do with my clients, their physical diseases go away, minimize, change, because we're dealing with the whole person, not
Hmm.
just the physical body. People take medications for the physical body, but again, it's not treating the root cause. So when we go to the root and we start healing the root causes of their pain or dis-ease, the physical symptoms in the body disappear, just like they do in the relationships.
100% agreed with
Mm-hmm.
that, and how I don't want to go into that topic of how medicine or Western medicine disregards all the other elements and only focuses on the physical body. Our body, I will leave that for now. There is one other thing, Tammy, I wanted to get a quick comment from you because we've been talking about healing the inner child, and we also talked about the space of a relationship or a marriage between two people, what happens or how do you deal when one person is very much interested and wants to go down that path and explore healing, and the other person is, let's say, not in the same wavelength of that? Is there any way or any method that you recommend to your clients to deal with that? Or
Yeah, that's you said a quick response, but this is probably like the biggest part because I first of all get asked this question so often. It's a big one. And
yes.
I always have this response and then I'll add to it. I started my journey. My husband was not on board. He wasn't interested, didn't want anything to do with it, and was even uncomfortable by my growth. But what happens is you can't change when you're in that close of a relationship, you can't change one without changing the other. It's just the way it works. And so what happened was when I started healing myself, he started to transform indirectly. But this cannot happen if you're focused on the other person. This is what I've noticed because I'll have wives that are like, but he doesn't want to. I'm like, put your blinders on. We're not looking at him for a long time. We're going to let him do his thing. And that's what I had to do. I said to my husband at one point, I don't know if we're going to stay together. I don't know if we're going to move forward. I just know that I'm going to heal myself. I'm getting happy. And whatever you choose to do, cool. I was unattached to him coming along with me. And I think that's where you need to be is radically breaking those codependent strings with everyone in your life. Because if you want to heal, it just has to be between you and you. Like you have to make everyone else autonomous to themselves and say, I am creating what I want in my life and they get to create whatever they want. And it's all good, right? But you have to, I feel like you have to cut those codependent strings and say, I'm unattached to the result. Like you get to go wherever it is you want to be. And that's why I think for most, they come along. Almost the spouse almost always comes along. They're probably like, 5 steps behind, but they're coming because you can't change one without the other. Either they're going to have to split up, like attracts like, that which is like into itself is drawn. That's a law in the universe. And so when one changes, the whole has to change. And he who has the strongest energy will always win. So say you're more of the supporter in the relationship and you're the one that wants to change. Well, you got to kind of address those codependent strings because a supporter is very codependent. So for the person who asked me that, I always know, okay, if you're that attached to where they're at, that means we got to work on codependency within you because that means you need other people to be X, Y, Z in order for you to be okay. And that's not true autonomy at all. So you get to claim who you be, the whole, healed, perfect, amazing being that you be, and allow everyone else to claim their own.
Thank you for this beautiful answer, and I think you expressed it very concisely, even though you said that this is a very big topic. And but I think
I tried to keep it short for you.
Thank you. I got actually, Tammy, I got the answer that I was looking for. So I hope that the listener also has got the answer if they were thinking the same question. Tammy, before I start wrapping this intriguing conversation up, where will you direct the listener who wants to find out more about you?
Well, I can offer you my link tree. I'm on all the platforms, really. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can find me anywhere. I'd say the best bet if you want to have a conversation with me is on Instagram. But also I have my link tree if anyone out there is struggling in their marriage. On my link tree, you could book a discovery call to have, 25 minutes with me to discuss, working with me. But I'd say Instagram for anything else. Any other questions or yeah.
That's great. Thank you for that. And Tammy, I have also two quick questions that I always ask my guests. And the first one is, what does personal development mean to you?
It means to be in a constant state of growth and self-discovery.
That's great. And a hypothetical question, if you were to go back in time and meet your, say, 18-year-old self, what's one piece of advice you would give her?
Oh, everything's going to be okay. You got this. You're safe. You got a beautiful ride ahead of you.
I'm taking a break because I can hear now. Is that your dog? I can hear. I will need to cut that
Sorry.
off. That's all right. Uh, Tammy, I want to thank you very much for this conversation. I thought it was, apart from intriguing, which I knew that it would be beforehand, I think that we covered some interesting and important topics, and hopefully we gave to the listener, at the very least, some inspiration that can lead to transformation as well, because it has to start with some kind of shift and some action to be taken. So I want to wish you all the very best with your mission, with your personal and professional life. And I will leave it to you for some parting wisdom to someone listening this conversation. What would you say? Let's assume it's a lady. What would you say to her as a conclusion of this conversation?
You're not stuck. There's nothing, I mean, I said this earlier, but it is just always my parting message is like, you're not stuck with anything that you have in your life or any way of being or any
Mhm.
personality trait. None of it is set in stone. You can change anything about your life. Because, the people that are at the very bottom of the emotional scale, it's powerlessness. It's because they feel powerless to change their life. So I just want to empower every woman out there that there is absolutely nothing that you can't do, be, or have. And to really take authority of your life, meaning it wasn't until I owned every part of me who I've been, my experience, that I was
Mhm.
able to empower myself to change it. And so take on all the responsibility, release all the shame, and just accept what's been in order that you can create really the beautiful life of your desires that is totally, totally possible. That's the best parting message I could give.
Thank you.